Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today I'm here to help you get set up for the final game week of the 23-24 FPL season, game week 38. But as always, let's start off with looking at my game week 37 team performance, and I've got a little bit of a short story to give you for this one because a minus 16 was not on the agenda, and to be honest, I'm kind of glad in a way it happened because it's at least a story for me to tell for years to come. Now, as you will know, I was pretty set up with my transfers for game week 37. I was looking at taking a -4 to bring in Trippier and Richarlison, but I was going to wait for Postecoglou's press conference notes before making that Richarlison move. So I waited until he had given the all clear after the press conference, said absolutely no more injury problems, all good. So I took the -4 there and then to bring in Richarlison, who, as you can see, is not in my team right now. That is because, as I'm sure you're well aware, he was then shortly after ruled out by his Brazilian national team manager for the upcoming Copa America in the summer, 6 weeks from now. So obviously that made it very likely he was going to miss out game week 37. That did, of course, end up transpiring. So I'm glad that, okay, I'm not glad that I had to take another hit to get rid of him, but I'm glad I at least did make that move because I would have ended up with 0 and having taken a -4 anyway. I wanted a player that was going to play. So that obviously made a -8 almost essential for me. So I took that -4 extra to bring in Havertz for Richarlison. By that point, honestly, I wasn't even interested in any other double game weekers. I wanted to set myself up for game week 38 as well, and I thought Havertz had a good chance of returning against Man United, so I just bit the bullet and went for it. Outside of that, there are 2 other hits unaccounted for. That is because João Pedro was also given pretty negative news during the press conference for De Zerbi. He basically said, I think he was sad about the injury that had just occurred to João Pedro. Kind of reading between the lines a little bit there, it sounded like he was a big, major doubt for the game week, and therefore it put me in a position where I needed another striker. I did want Jackson anyway. I wasn't originally willing to take a -4 for that move, and I already had Gusto as well. So in the end, given the news on Gusto didn't look too optimistic either, I just went on tilt and I made those transfers too. Definitely ill-advised, and it will be a lesson I learned for future seasons that, okay, when my back's against the wall, maybe I don't go on full tilt, because that's definitely what I did. But also to wait until all of the press conferences are done, even if it doesn't relate to the players that I'm buying or selling or planning on, because later that day, João Pedro was also seemingly ruled out, and I could have made quite a simple swap and not made the Richarlison move in the first place. So waiting until all of the news is out is going to be something that I take as a learning for next year. Anyway, moving on to the team itself for game week 37, I actually did manage a green arrow, which feels like a bit of an achievement considering the -16. I ended up with 144 points. That nets out to 128. It was enough for about a 6 or 7k green arrow. It's not as big as I wanted it to be to go into the week with, to go into the final game week of the season with. But regardless, taking a -16 and still getting a green arrow, I would call that an achievement. I'm very happy with that. I'm relieved, to say the least, that my mistakes made on Friday haven't cost me the opportunity to go for a top 100k finish in game week 38. So I'll dust myself off, I'll go again in 38, and obviously that's what this video is all about. In the meantime though, looking across my team, I think I can be fairly happy. My bench boost scored, 24 points overall. So again, pretty successful bench boost, even if there were hits to take to get to that point. I'm okay with that as a score, as a net score overall. And Gvardiol obviously was the highlight of the week, getting 2 goals in that first game. Very, very happy with him, even at 50% EO. 27 points does a lot of good, and that is a big part of why I was able to resurrect a green arrow from a -16. Points elsewhere, obviously Haaland came in with 2 goals in the second game. Palmer got 2 returns across the game week, and Porro got his goal as well. Those were the particular highlights. But let's not waste any more time reflecting on game week 37. Let's move on to game week 38 and trying to get a top 100k finish, and hopefully trying to set you up nicely as well. So I've brought back the Game Week 38 transfer targets this week because there are a number of players that I am really interested in that I'd love to bring into my side with just one free transfer for Game Week 38 that could make all the difference. Starting from the top, Michael Elise, I will be talking about a bit more later on, but the data's great. A good home fixture against a team with nothing to play for anymore, who are quite likely out drinking as we speak, considering they've secured Champions League qualification for the first time in 40 years. I would expect Palace to have a lot of fun at Selhurst Park in that game. Elise's data has been fantastic. I really do like him as a differential pick, although a lot of managers do seem to also like him, so maybe he won't be quite as differential as he was at the start of the game week. Moving down, Mo Salah, I won't be talking about him too much later on, although he is a captaincy candidate. I think with him in mind, I would love it if I could get to him for free, and I think he would be my number one priority if I could use free transfers to get there. For a hit, I think it's slightly more difficult to condone it, but if you're chasing and you're tempted to put the armband on him against a Wolves side who, again, have nothing to play for, have looked very shaky recently, and Salah does play for the most, or the best data-wise anyway, attack in the league, and of course, Klopp's final home game in front of the Anfield crowd, I can see that going very, very well for them, and Salah is still mopping up the chances, as I'll discuss later on. For a hit, I think if you're chasing, it can make sense, and especially if you're putting the armband on him, then that could be the difference that will give you the opportunity to overtake those who maybe are playing a bit more cautiously. They'll probably captain Haaland. They'll probably have a fairly template team. A lot of us do at the moment. Salah is definitely not a part of that template, so he could be that talismanic player with the explosive potential to help resurrect a green arrow and hopefully finish the season strongly. On that note, Trent Alexander-Arnold, I would also have some consideration for. Again, won't be easy for many managers to get to because of his price, but if you've got money in the bank and you're looking for a defender to bolster your backline with plenty of attacking upside, alongside the fact that they're going up against a side that aren't scoring a lot of goals at the moment, Trent Alexander-Arnold does tick all of the boxes. If you can get there for a free transfer, I would definitely be considering that to differentiate yourself if you're chasing. Arsenal defenders, Man City defenders are always going to take priority, but I think at this point, those are more cautious picks, and if you're trying to hold rank, those make sense because of effective ownership. But if you want to kind of have a Hail Mary in defence, then Alexander-Arnold, or maybe, if you're feeling really brave, Kieran Trippier, both players with good upside. I would prefer Alexander-Arnold because of the home fixture against a side that aren't scoring many goals and better attacking data, but either of them will probably fit the bill. Now, moving down, I'm going to offer up one striker, one goalkeeper as well. Chris Wood, good underlying data, has missed a few chances recently, but he's at least getting those chances. And until he went on a little bit of a cold streak, he was statistically at least the best converting striker with his finishing in the league so far this season. Since that point, I think he's gone 4 straight XG without scoring, so he's definitely due. And against Burnley, away from home, obviously Burnley have been a terrible defence all season long and have nothing to play for at this point either. So I would expect Chris Wood to have good opportunities, but obviously a lot depends on whether or not you expect him to start. I would personally expect him to play the game, and I'd personally be expecting him to get good minutes in that match. However, there is, of course, a risk, as there always is with Nottingham Forest, that any player at any moment could get rotated because at the end of the day, they do have a very big squad with a lot of depth there. Moving down to David Raya, he is the only goalkeeper I would use a transfer on this week. No other goalkeeper would tempt me, and I think I'd only go there, as I'll discuss later, if I had absolutely nothing else to do. There is marginal upside to bringing him in if you've got a spare Arsenal slot against any other keeper this week because they've got the best chance of a clean sheet. But I think there's perhaps more upside to be gained from other positions in your outfield that you can probably make up a bigger gap in terms of expected points in Game Week 38. That being said, there are teams out there who will look around their starting 11 and think, I've got absolutely nothing else to do. I love the 10 outfielders. Therefore, I think David Raya could fit the bill and just help lock out maybe a double Arsenal defence for you, cover off that from an effective ownership point of view. And of course, there is marginal upside, or at least potential marginal upside there, because they're more likely to keep a clean sheet than, say, a Petrovic at home to Bournemouth or an Onana away at Brighton. Obviously, Raya at home to Everton is marginally better there. So it's not a move I'd completely disregard, but I'd definitely put that to one side unless you've got absolutely nothing else to do. So let's move quickly on to the captaincy debate for game week 38, or I suppose not really that much of a debate if you're looking at holding rank and you're not looking at taking a risk, because Erling Haaland is objectively the best pick this week. West Ham at home, great fixture. West Ham have been playing with very little intent recently. Man City obviously have it all to play for in game week 38. And statistically speaking, Haaland is by far the best choice. 1.13 XGI per 90 is the best in the league, and 35 attacking returns, including 27 goals as well. I'd be very, very surprised if he didn't get a couple against West Ham. He's got a very good record against West Ham for what that's worth anyway. And I think statistically speaking, he's the most likely player to haul in game week 38. However, it does get more complicated than that if you're looking at chasing rank or maybe trying to beat a mini league rival and you're 10, 15 points out from achieving that. Because if you're captaining Erling Haaland, it's very likely that the player ahead of you is also going to be doing that, and you're probably going to have to make up that difference in non-captain players and differentials when a lot of us have fairly template teams at the moment, it must be said. So it is unlikely that you're going to be able to make up a 10 to 15, maybe even 20-point gap if you're captaining Erling Haaland this week and you don't have a number of differentials in your side. So that leaves you with a decision on whether or not you want to go a little bit brave, a bit of a Hail Mary on captaincy in game week 38, and go for someone else who has good upside and hope that Erling Haaland has an off day. Obviously, that is unlikely, but it can happen. He has blanked at times this season, so it wouldn't be impossible to think that he could blank against West Ham, as unlikely as that could be. That, with all of that in mind, my favoured second captain this week would be Mo Salah. He's got good data, 0.99 XGI per 90. He's on penalties, good home fixture against Wolves. I've already mentioned that is a very juicy fixture for Liverpool. Anfield at home, Klopp's final home game, of course, and they're going to want to go out on a high. I expect Salah to get plenty of chances in that match. And yes, he's snatched at a lot recently, but at some point you do expect him to come good. And if you're going to take a gamble and go for someone differential, because he will be very, very differential amongst the top ranks, and you're looking at chasing 10 to 15 points, Mo Salah is one of those players who has the explosive capabilities to match Haaland in any given game week. It might not happen this week. There is obviously a higher chance that Haaland hauls, but if you're chasing, Salah is one player that could certainly make up that difference in certain universes. Other players that could theoretically also make up that difference include Cole Palmer, great underlying data, not quite as good as Salah's, but also on penalties, the most points out of any player here as well. So when he scores, he gets bonus. He's gotten plenty of assists as well, more goals and more assists than Mo Salah as well, it must be said. Bournemouth, nothing to play for either. So Palmer is also a player that I definitely think about, although he won't be quite as differential as Mo Salah because he's already owned by pretty much everyone in the top ranks. He just won't be captained by that many. So you might get a 110, 120% EO Palmer. So you're getting a net benefit of 80, maybe 90% from him. Whereas with Mo Salah, I'd be surprised if you don't get 150, 160% net benefit from him. So that's much more likely to catapult you up the ranks. Moving down, Son, again, I think is an outside call. Not as good data. He is on penalties, though, and plays the weakest side in the league, Sheffield United. So you could look at him as a bit of a differential. And one player that I just can't really stop thinking about this week as a differential captaincy option, but also a transfer in, is Elise. Like I mentioned earlier, good data, 0.71 is actually better than Son's. And when he's been on the pitch, he's been absolutely phenomenal this season. There is also the argument that Palace, despite playing for nothing recently, have been brilliant and kind of unleashed under Glasner. So Elise and Eze and Mateta have all really profited from that change in style and change in attitude. And Aston Villa, as I mentioned, will have been out celebrating this week. They've just secured Champions League football. They are going to be very relaxed against the Selhurst Park crowd and Crystal Palace at home. And I do think that this is an opportunity to look at, if not a differential captain, at least a differential transfer in. And to be honest, if you're really, really chasing, I don't mind Elise or Eze, who is, of course, on penalties, as a differential captaincy shout this game week. So that brings me on nicely to one of my planned transfers this week. And one thing I could look at doing is removing Anthony Gordon, who is flagged. He's got a little bit of an injury, but I still think it's likely he plays the final game week, by the way. But I could look at moving him on and bringing in Elise and really putting my money where my mouth is with that Aston Villa home tie. 0.71 XGI per 90 is better than Gordon's, and I do prefer the fixture as well. And of course, he's not flagged, Gordon is. So I could look at doing that, but it is a little bit more complicated than that because Gordon is currently already sat on my bench anyway. So I'd have to look at one of my other 7 attackers to bench instead of Elise. And the most likely 2 that I could look at are probably in my forward line at either Isak, away at Brentford, of course, but great data on penalties, has looked phenomenal until very, very recently, or Jackson at home to Bournemouth, who again, good data, good fixture. It's tough to condone benching either of them. But I think Elise's upside is good enough that if you're chasing, like me a little bit, I'm about 5-6 points outside the top 100k, that could be the difference maker. And on any given day, Elise could haul and one of those 2 players could blank. It's just about getting that decision right and whether or not I think that I need to make up enough points. 5 or 6 isn't that much. Maybe I don't need to go that differential to make up that gap. And maybe if I just play the sensible way, make some fairly logical transfers this week, then I maybe am able to make up the difference in the aggregate across all of the little bit of marginal gains that I get from other players. So with that, I'll move on to my team selection for game week 38 and describe some of the other moves I could potentially make. So as it stands, this is my bus team for game week 38. And to be honest, I really like the look of it. This is a really strong 11 overall, and I've got a bit of a benching dilemma as well. Gordon and Trippier, both on my bench, away at Brentford. Decent enough upside in both of those cases as well. So either of those could pull on my bench quite comfortably, and I just don't get the benefit of those points, of course. So any transfer I make here is going to be fraught with risk because I'm already pretty happy with my 11, although it's not that differential. Havertz is one player that I would say is differential enough and could help me out. I would like to have a little bit of something else to try and regain those 5 or 6 points that would get me to the top 100k finish. Now, as I mentioned, if I sell Gordon, I'd be going with a 3-5-2, and I'd probably be benching one of Isak or Jackson, because realistically, across that midfield line, I don't want to bench any of those 4 that are currently starting. I love all of them for this game week, so I definitely don't want to bench one of them. I'm obviously not going to bench Erling Haaland, who currently my armband is on. I don't think I need to differentiate there too much. So it's a question of whether or not I think Elise can outscore Isak or Jackson, and which one of those 2 I would actually go and bench. I think out of those 2 at the moment, I would probably just about back the home fixture for Jackson at home to Bournemouth and maybe bench Isak. Although saying that out loud, it doesn't sound particularly pleasant. And Isak has been so phenomenal recently that I really would not be surprised if he hauled. And if I benched him, that would really, really hurt, especially as a pen taker as well. Great data. I think that could also be unwise. So if I didn't make that move, the other move that I could look at making is the really, really boring one to get rid of either Petrovic or Onana, doesn't matter which, and bring in David Raya to give myself the double Arsenal defence and therefore cover me off clean sheet wise and give me some marginal benefit if they did get the clean sheet. Now, obviously, that's very boring. No one wants to be making a goalkeeper transfer in game week 38. But looking at my side, I don't want to make a defensive move because I've already got a benching headache with Trippier on the bench anyway. I could even potentially start him. Although, looking at my defence, Everton at home for Gabriel, West Ham at home for Gvardiol, and Sheffield United away for Porro, I can't really bench any one of those 3, I don't think. I'm very happy with all of them. The one thing that I'm missing in my lineup at the moment is double Arsenal defence. And I don't really want to sell any or bench any of those players for a second Arsenal defender. There might be a very, very marginal gain on benching Porro or selling Porro for a Ben White, for instance. But honestly, I think there's more marginal benefit from getting rid of Petrovic or Onana and starting Raya, because I think there's actually a good chance of a clean sheet, and I don't have to worry about the attacking returns that Porro or Gvardiol could get if I sold one of them. So overall, I think right now I'm more likely to make the goalkeeper move, which is really, really boring. So let me know in the comments below just how boring you think that is. Or if I should go with my previously suggested move of bringing in Elise, putting him in a 5-man midfield and benching one of Isak or Jackson. The one of the two that I'm more likely to do would be to bench Isak, but that doesn't sound right to me. So I think more likely to be making the goalkeeper move. But again, let me know in the comments below what you think of either of those. And as always, as we wrap up the final video of my FPL season, my debut season as a content creator as well, please do let me know in the comments below what moves you're planning on making. And if you've got any questions for me, I'll try and get back to you before the deadline. As we wrap up the video as well, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And a massive, massive thank you from me if you've watched any of my videos this season. I really do appreciate the support, and I can't wait to get cracking once again as we start preparing for the 24-25 FPL season.